Welcome to the Embrace the Serpent podcast. I am here today with none other than Shelly Davis, my beloved father. Welcome, Shelly. Dad. We are going to be talking about spirituality versus religion. What's the difference? And the reason that I wanted to invite my dad on this episode is because I learned everything that I know about spirituality and religion from him. And he has an interesting background as far as his upbringing and his teen and young adult years that led him to becoming the man that he became and the father that he was to me. And I just think it's really interesting, and I want to talk about it and get his perspective and all the things. So, yeah, welcome.
Okay, well, thanks. Always nice to see you and whatever exciting things you're involved in. If I can help, I certainly will. Apparently this fly wants me to get involved.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about what it was like to grow up as a... You all right over there?
Yeah, well, I will be, okay.
Okay. So what was it like to grow up in New York in a Jewish household, in what I'm assuming was kind of a Jewish community as well? No?
Oh. Well, I mean, basically, they were where I grew up from the age of 10 on, which is mainly what I remember. I mean, I remember the other stuff, but mainly Catholic and Jewish. I mean, we had a Jewish center in the town and, lots of churches and, big Catholic things. So a lot of Italians and Jews, that's a typical New York, Long Island kind of scene. I guess I wasn't as aware of the Protestant from Catholic. I just knew that there were Jews and then there was Christians, I guess. But
right.
But it was I grew up in in a nice town. Everybody got along and wasn't really any problems. As opposed to, I think I heard stories from my mom and dad. They grew up with more religious prejudice against Jews and stuff like that. They grew up my dad grew up in Manhattan, my mom grew up in Brooklyn, and but I think that out on the suburbs, everybody was just maybe too busy to be prejudiced.
So what did they share with you about the prejudice that they experienced growing up?
Well, I think just being called hateful names and stuff like that. I think my uncle, my mom's brother, and stuff like that. And I think that in general, from my dad, each block, it seemed like where in Manhattan, they had their own turf. Now you see that today, but I think that different religious and ethnic groups tended to hang out together. And that was part of what happened, I think, in New York. All these people came. All these waves of immigrants came to our country, and so there were the Irish, the Italians, the Jews. There were many, and they kind of like helped each other. So that, of course, so really Judaism and as communicated by my parents to me was more of a cultural, ethnic thing as opposed to really a religious thing, but. As a Jewish boy, my brother first, and then me, and then my sister, we were all expected to get the bar mitzvah or the bas mitzvah, which, if anyone doesn't know, that's just when you're 13 and you become a man or a woman in the Jewish religion, which really just means that you have to go in front of the synagogue, which is the congregation, and you participate in the service. And you read from the Torah, which is essentially the holy writings that part of which are the Bible, part of which are other things. I may have that wrong, but anyway, it's a big scroll, and you read a little section that corresponds with your birthday.
Do you remember it?
No, I don't remember what it was.
Give me just a little snippet.
I can't remember the snippet.
You gotta remember something.
But I had to learn it and spoke it in Hebrew.
That's what I mean.
And no.
You can't remember just a little piece?
No. I mean, everybody knows Brukatoy, blessed be. Yeah.
Brukatoy. That's how you say it?
Yeah, pretty much Brukatoy. You know, and there's more. You know, I think it's. But I know I didn't remember. But at the time, I had to. You know, I had a tutor. My parents. You know, so we didn't really go regularly to synagogue except for the big holidays. You know.
Yeah.
And but when you were getting to that point, we had this man came over to the house, and he would. Taught me how to pronounce the words and phonetically, and you know, and I probably went to Hebrew school very briefly to learn about things, but wasn't really what you consider to be very much religious education, either through my parents or really through the synagogue. And imagine if I was really interested, you know, I would have been encouraged, because that's what my parents were like.
So when do you remember becoming interested in other religious or spiritual practices? When do you remember starting to question what your given religion was?
Well, I don't think religion ever really had that much interest for me outside of what was just something that you were expected to do. But I think that I was fortunate to have a loving family, and so I suppose at some point you realize that it seems like the purpose of religion is to emphasize those things that will make it more loving and support you in your life. Anyone, whether you're a Christian or a Jew or any other religion, the purpose is to help you to understand the meaning of your life. And I think that you also understand the meaning of your life just from the way that you're loved by your parents, and so that. So I don't know, but there's a time that happens. I mean, I guess at some point you're aware of the fact that, you know, maybe there's some other people, obviously, that are not getting that kind of support, who, so I guess I was aware of the fact that I was fortunate to have that support. But then, of course, I had, you know, just the usual teenage conflict with the authority of parents and stuff like that. But I've always been an avid reader, and I think you get the moral of a story. It's not just looking at a story for entertainment. Usually a good story or good book reminds you of, gives you a lesson. And isn't that what religion is? It's giving you lessons, except that the religious part of it is that it's saying, it's codifying it, and it's based on a big tradition of all this stuff. But I think probably I was lucky. I had I don't remember what grade it was, but required reading was Siddhartha. And so it might have been in junior high school, might have been in high school, I don't know. But that was a great book, and of course it exposed me to Eastern religion. Also, being an avid jazz fan and still a jazz musician to this day, the jazz players discovered Eastern philosophy. And so the whole concept of jazz is very open, and I guess you could say it's spiritual. It is for me anyway, and I think for truly a musician that's in touch with their heart and soul. It doesn't necessarily have to be in jazz, but there is in music, because I am a musician, and music is spiritual just by its very nature. I mean, it's not spiritual if you're just, doing it mechanically. But if you put your soul into it, it kind of takes you into another space that I guess some people would call spiritual. I call it spiritual. And so somewhere in my teens, yeah, I guess. And then I think I read, it's not just Siddhartha, but other books, Thoreau, I think I mentioned that to you the other day. I think that the schools were good. I went to good schools. Another thing, I've had good parents, and I had good schools. And so, yeah, there was, you study stuff like that in school, spirituality. Just, implied in understanding history and understanding, great fiction, all those things. I mean, Moby Dick, even. I mean, there's all just about anything, even in the secular world, has a spiritual component. So, why I was attracted to it, part of what was happening at that time in the growing up in the '60s. I think that my generation was interested in it, but there was a continuum. It wasn't just the '60s. The hippies of the '60s didn't discover peace and love. There's always been that kind of energy in the literature of every of every culture. So
And what did your parents think when you left home at 17, joined a band where you were photographed wearing blouses on a pirate ship, and you became a hippie? Your hair was down to your waist. You were definitely doing some psychedelics.
I mean, I was part of that generation, and my parents were great. They understood that I was my life, and whatever I wanted to do, they supported, and then I didn't necessarily throw in their face things that I thought they would be upset about. So I was able to,
like I did.
I'm just saying is that I was living at when I was living at home. I tried to respect my parents' home and the expectations they had for certain behaviors, and it didn't really stop me from doing what I wanted to when I was out of the house, and so everything was
When
cool.
did you stop identifying as Jewish? Because to reflect to you as your child, I never thought of you as Jewish. We didn't do or take part in any Jewish religious holidays, and the only time that we ever did, it was because we were going to visit the family in New York, or the family in New York was coming to visit us, and we would touch on it a little bit. But I only really remember partaking in like a couple of Passovers. I went to a couple of cousins' bar mitzvahs. I definitely did not have a bar mitzvah. So I don't consider myself Jewish. And I always tell people, I'll say to some people, I'm half Jewish. And they'll say, well, Jewish is a religion. And I'm like, it's a culture. And you touched on that earlier.
Well, it is.
Definitely is a culture.
I mean,
every
religious religion has a cultural aspect of it. It's just that so happens that in my case, our family thought of it more as a cultural tradition, even though from what my mom used to light the candles on Friday, which is part of the Jewish religion, and I don't know if she did it every Friday, but I know that she did it some, and so I don't even remember I think even when I was doing my bar mitzvah and going in front of the congregation and reading all that, I think I was doing it just because it was expected that I would do it. It wasn't that I had a really deep connection with studying about that. But what happened is when I became interested in Eastern religions, and I saw how that overlapped my appreciation for love and peace and all the things that were being put up into the forefront during the '60s. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, wait a minute, here's you read about Buddha, basically in the Siddhartha book, is there's a beautiful unfolding of someone who had everything, was at the, like if you were, say, in American culture, and you would say, go to college, get a job, make a bunch of money, do all this, do that. Well, the Siddhartha story is, here's a guy, he's already a royal, he's the son of a king, he has everything, and he gives it all up in order to experience something else. So for a person of my age at that time, of course, that was powerful to see that story, because already my generation was saying, I don't want to devote my whole life to getting a great education and making a bunch of money and doing all, and everything being focused on the material world. I know there's something more, and I think that's what my generation at that time was really about. Of course, every generation you could say have it, but I think that more and more people are aware of the fact that it's not all about the dollar, and it's not all about power over people and war and things like that. There's something else in life that's worth living and promoting, and I think that's what religion is supposed to help us do.
Then why do you think that religion has been behind wars?
Well, because it's misused, and mainly it's because power and also dogma. I think that the biggest difference between religion and spirituality is that you don't necessarily have to feel like do it this way or else you're going to the bad place, or these are the rules, or this will or we'll stone you. I mean,
burn you,
all those kind of things. I think that gradually humanity is learning that we need to be tolerant, and that there isn't any one path. And even if you do take one path, it doesn't mean that that somebody else on a different path is not spiritual, or does not have an awareness and an understanding of love and peace and things of that nature. It's just that expresses it in a different way. So I think all these thoughts were coming in me. And then I remember when Donovan came out, it's not just about jazz, so that Donovan album, I probably don't know Donovan. Anyway, he had a song, it was actually top 40 hit, Wear Your Love Like Heaven. I mean, what a beautiful, and I remember when that album came out, and I said, wow, that's great. And then the jazz people, John Coltrane, had do this album, and you get a jazz album, and there's this big poem, A Love Supreme, and it's all about, I mean, it's this, it's amazing, really. And you could compare that to the music that, for example, Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Polka Dot Bikini. That was like a hit song when I remember when I was like,
it was today's like trap music.
Well, whatever it is,
meaningless fun.
I guess meaningless fun, but I was always kind of attracted to other things, and I don't know why. Probably just because I was being supported by what was happening.
So how did you end up in a gold record-winning pop band that had a song? The hit song was, "Girl, I heard you're getting married. Please tell me it's not true." Something like that.
Well, I guess just luck, but actually, I played trumpet in my high school band, and I must have been if I just graduated high school, or maybe before, whatever it is. Somebody said, we're just putting a band together, and so it was a soul band. So I played trumpet in this band. We did like James Brown medleys and stuff like that. Anyway, that's what happened, and then that band ended up.
Did you leave the band because you felt like it didn't have that spiritual aspect to it?
Well, yeah, it wasn't really a profession of spiritual, because the band, everybody was spiritual in that we all loved each other. We were 11 people in the band, and everybody was we were very close, and still are. And it was just really about the music, because I was just into jazz, and where you would just play something different all the time. And in the band, even though we went through periods of time where it became more jazzier, more improvisation, the core audience of the band wanted to hear the hits, and so I had a consistent. I knew every night exactly what notes I was going to play, be it on the keyboard or on the trumpet, whatever. I was just very.
I love this music as a metaphor for the spiritual practices, because it's like, yeah, you just prefer jazz. So it's not, and you don't have to make the pop band that you were in or the pop music that you were playing wrong.
No, of course
It just wasn't what charmed you the most.
Yeah,
and so you moved toward you followed your charm, or you followed your bliss. I want to go back to dogma, because the reason I was inspired to have this conversation today was because as a spiritual teacher, which is essentially what I am now, I found that I come up against sometimes people being triggered by my use of words like God or spirit or the divine or the universe, or the fact that I teach sacred rituals where we make offerings and we chant Sanskrit mantras. So I'm using practices and rituals and talking about deities and talking about God and the universe and all of these things. And it can sometimes be received as religious. And those that often have that resistance to that and are not drawn to that or feel uncomfortable by it often have explained to me that they have some sort of what they consider a religious dogma, where they were raised really religiously. They were raised in a way that didn't support them to have freedom in what kind of practices they were drawn towards. So they were sort of told, this is what you have to do. This is, what your religion is, and you better do it. You better go to church. You better, believe in God, and these groups of people are wrong and these groups of people are bad, and, prejudice against other religions, prejudice against other races. And I just so obviously did not grow up like that, because you didn't raise me that way. And I was raised a lot of freedom to explore different practices, and I never remember being told what religion I was. I remember being taken to different places, taken on to the Jewish rituals that my Jewish side of the family had, and then taken to unity churches, right, where you guys have played, which is kind of a hippie church. And
no, it's not really a hippie church. It's New Thought, I believe.
It's New Age, which is another word for that. And
but it's been around over 100 years. That's what I'm saying. It's saying there is a rich tradition throughout history of a segment of people that go beyond the traditional, and so I'm very proud that you're continuing in that, and I'm proud of humanity, and that I believe that we're going to get more and more into that, less restrictive, less
dogmatic,
me against you, dogmatic.
Yeah. I mean, what I try to express to people when they voice their concerns with, the usage of the word God and the usage of the rituals that I do, is that the practices and the rituals that I've been initiated into is it's beyond religion. It's much older than religion. So the Hindu religion was inspired by these teachings that were actually shared through the yogis, which they were not sharing it from a place of religion. There's not a leader of the yoga religion, because it's not a religion. It was teachings that was shared, ancient practices that were channeled by beings who have no name. There's no recording of who these beings were. They were just beings who dedicated their lives to channeling the wisdom that they knew that later generations were going to need and were going to pull from. Mm-hmm. And then there have been groups of people that have taken those teachings and created a religion around them. And isn't that similar to the teachings of Jesus Christ? He shared his teachings to everyone. It was to benefit the entire world. It wasn't to only benefit a certain group of people, but a group of people then took his teachings and created a religion around it. So that, to me, is one of the differences between spirituality and religion, because to me, it is a completely free to anyone. Spirituality is free to anyone. You don't have to subscribe to it. You don't have to say, I believe in it. This is my thing, and everyone else is wrong. It's just, to what I say is that I'm inviting people to discover what their connection to source, God, spirit, the divine, the universe, cosmic consciousness, whatever words you want to use to describe the indescribable, really. But whatever, I'm inviting you to discover what that means to you, and what does that feel like, and what does it look like, and what does it smell like, and what does it taste like. Discover it for yourself. And for me, I really resonate with the yogic technologies, and I really resonate with these sacred rituals from the Vedas. They just speak to me. Doing them makes me feel good. It makes me feel connected to the divine. It makes me feel peaceful. It makes me feel blissful. So that's what works for me. And I discovered that way later on in life. Mom was meditating since I was a little girl, but I didn't, want to practice meditation when I was 8. It took me, another 20 years from that point to say, actually there's some peace to be acquired by that. Maybe I should try that.
Yeah. And then another, you mentioned the word cosmic consciousness, so I just wanted to, I think I've told you this before, but for the listeners, I did of the audience. For when I was about, I must have been about 18, 17 or 18, in addition to discovering yoga and becoming addicted to that. I also took a class. It was an adult education class in my town, and Anthony Fisichella taught, and he was a Catholic. I mean, he was a practicing Catholic, but the name of the course was Esotericism, and one of the books that we read in that class was a book called Cosmic Consciousness. So, so he had he came from a particular school, which I studied with for a year and a half, the Arcane School. And he had a very, very clear teaching about how throughout history, the ageless wisdom, or just like you were saying about how you feel like that these things didn't have a person's name on. But in this class, we went through history and talked about all the different religions, all the different teachers, not just religions, but also just philosophical teachers, and showing how there's a common thread. And so that was very, it kind of complemented what I had already been involved in. Obviously, that's why I was attracted to take the class. And so I found that, this is happening. There's other people that you can still be religious and spiritual. You can still be, and part of every religion is a more metaphysical interpretation of what other people might. So within each religion, there's like a spectrum of people who are more fundamental and people who are kind of loosey-goosey and not in a bad way, but and each person is allowed to be what they want. If you enjoy doing these rituals, and using the different gods and goddesses from a tradition that predates Hinduism, for example, but was adopted by it.
Yes.
A part of it, I think, is because so many people have done that there's already a collective thought form on the planet. So, like, you don't have to start from ground zero and say, let me tune into the love of the universe and see if I can somehow project that and implement it and model it in my life. And just to do it from a strictly non-specific. But if you can use these gods and goddesses and deities as a way to enhance, and you now all of a sudden, somebody else is doing that too. In fact, not only somebody else doing it now, but somebody for thousands of years has been doing that same thing. Yes. But you got that collective energy, so it's easy for you to just pop up and maybe go to a higher level. I haven't personally, except for like that 1 year and a half, where I was specifically following a particular format. I've kind of, because of I got involved in, I don't know how it happened, but I got involved in reading Krishnamurti. And he took me to a place where I felt like I really need to just be, I appreciate everything, but I don't, there's not a need for me to fixate. So like I went from spiritual window shopping, which is what I think that a lot of people in my generation, and maybe it's continuing on where people go from one thing to another, you get to like that, it's not necessary. You get to see that it's more...
it's not necessary, but it's nice.
Well, I suppose, it is nice.
And just like it's nice for me to have all these beautiful goddesses on my altar, and it's nice for another person to wear a cross, and they put that cross on, and that feels like, that feels so good. It's like it isn't necessary, but it's just a nice thing, and I also think it's quite human. It's quite human of us to have these little tangible symbols that make us feel connected with something that is beyond physical matter anyway. But it's very human of us, no?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a wonderful thing to have something on the material plane that consistently reminds us of the freedom that we have to not be strictly on the material plane. So it's kind of like a doorway, and I think that's kind of like the way you use it. And so I guess I came to a place where I felt that I'd like to feel that everything is a doorway to appreciating both the spiritual and the material and the whole flow of it all. I didn't feel like I wanted to just say, I have to have this object or this tradition as a path to it. But I appreciate that some people do, just like you said, if a person has a cross on their neck or on their wall, and every time I'm hoping that every time they look at it, it reminds them of the deeper meaning of those kind of things. And so there's a great value, I think, in religion. And since obviously I am my wife and I are music directors at a Unity Church, and I feel like the people that come there, they're fed. They're fed by the message, fed by the music, and I think I'm not going to say they need it, but it charms them. And to participate in that, I do it. I don't do it disdainfully. I do it with a passion. I do it because I kind of lock into that. I say I accept it. One doesn't take away from the other. You can be completely, and in fact, if some of my old friends from the old days, you'll find out some of their kids have become like Orthodox Jews. Or I think a lot of people, as they get older, they can be more connected with their roots. They kind of go back to that.
Well, you have 2 daughters, and one of them is me, who is spiritual teacher, yogi, all of the things. And you have another daughter that is Christian and goes to church and really, really resonates with that teaching. And so, yeah, I mean, you can have parents that have this really open way of raising kids, and you have 2 children go in completely different paths, but it's all going kind of to the same place, which is that feeling of peace that you get from whatever it is, that whatever religious practice you practice, you're getting to the same place, which is this spiritual connection, right? Spiritual connection with what?
Spiritual connection with what? With the infinite love of the universe. I mean, there's like you said, whatever word you want to put on it. But yeah, I'm very blessed and very thankful that both you and your sister have an appreciation for the deeper things in life. And even though you completely, one is Jada is more in a more traditional path, and she's nourished by that, and I've seen her family be nourished by that, and you're in a different kind of path, but you're both made me very happy. So there's a lot of people in this world that are very need help, and so I just say I like to feel like of course I'm happy that I believe my children are going to help other people and help the world. What more can you ask for than to, when you leave this earth, is that maybe you've done something that helps everybody get along and is advancing the planet and humanity in a way that is in line with all these traditions. That's all these traditions of religions and philosophies and spiritual. I mean, I don't think anybody gets up in the morning and really in their heart believes, what can I do that's really terrible today? I think most people want to do something good, And, I mean, there's always going to be people who are so lost that they're consumed by
some of the worst things that happen that are rooted in a religious belief and a religious dogma. And that's why it's important that we have these kinds of conversations and we open and we shed the light on that truth, that when we don't understand that all of these religious practices there is a thread, and that there is no need to set off bombs and kill mass murders and do all of these horrendous acts in the name of God. You know?
Well, yeah, I mean,
it's why it's important. That's why I wanted to have this conversation, because I think that's needed. It's needed for us to talk about this and to talk about what the difference is between religion and spirituality, and how even though there are those that are confused and that are lost, and they make those choices within their religion because they think that they're doing it on behalf of God, and if they don't do it, if these other people exist, somehow they're wrong, and they need to get rid of them. We need to remind people that, like you said, religion is not a bad thing. It's not bad to have a religious practice, and there really isn't a difference between pure religious practices, meaning practices that are done really from the heart and from a place of devotion and from a place of, like you said, wanting to bring good into the world, wanting to spread love, and spirituality. Spirituality is essentially just that connection with that oneness, connected with unity, connected with source, connected with nature. And it's really just a difference in words and semantics, and it matters to a lot of people. So I find myself wanting to have this conversation so that we can talk about why does it matter. And I think that it matters to so many people because they see those horrendous acts linked with religion, and so then they go, oh, religion is bad, and then I'm just going to say, I don't believe in anything then. And they disconnect themselves, they close themselves off then from having a relationship with the depth, the great depth of beauty and love that is available through practices that connect you with the divine. They close off to all of it. And what I notice in some of people that I meet along the path is there's a closedness then, because they have that fear of religion. And I understand as well, because even though you guys raised me the way that you did, mom's mom was very, very Catholic, and she did some scary things, like burning crosses in our couches and throwing holy oil on me and disowning me when I was 14 because I was into witchcraft. And so I saw some of that. She was also prejudiced against certain groups of people, and I always felt like that didn't resonate with me, and that wasn't something that I subscribed to. Even as a really young child, I never subscribed to that kind of religious dogma. And I understand why there is some fear around religion, or some confusion around having a relationship with God, meaning that you are subscribing to this kind of religious stuff.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it makes a difference whether you're a religious person or a spiritual person. There's always an opportunity to be corrupt and to be confused and to be judgmental in a negative way, regardless of whether you're coming from a traditional religion or from a spiritual group. I mean, it's really not whether you're spiritual or religious. It's whether you every day just trying to be a nice person. Try to do the things that are helpful. Of course, you got to take care of yourself. You got to take care of your family, and then you got to see what you can do to help your neighborhood, everyone. I mean, it's really not so much about what do I believe. It's really so much as what are you doing? What are you, how are you speaking? How are you relating to people? Yes. That's really, it's not so much what name you want to put on your thing. But in regards to another reason why you didn't feel like you were heavily influenced to be a practicing Jewish person is because, just as you say, because mom, her mom was a Christian, and mom grew up in that Christian. And so we more or less, I guess, I don't even know if we had a conversation about it, but it just seemed like I kind of like mom was more involved in Christianity then I was involved in Judaism. And so we exposed both of you to Christianity, and for Jada, your sister, she really liked it. She liked the big church, she liked the choir, she liked all that kind of stuff. And so she just kind of got attracted to it. And I think for a while you liked going to Unity, you taking care of the babies over there. And
I never liked going to church.
But anyway,
let's just be clear.
Well, you didn't never
churches,
you never liked that much anyway.
a preacher telling me what to do. I mean, it just none of it ever resonated with me. I never remember a time in my life where I felt connected to a church. I never felt connected to it. And I considered myself atheist when I was really young, and then I considered myself agnostic. And I got to this point where I was like, I just don't know. Mm-hmm. And I kind of don't care. That was where I was at as a young person. I was like, I really don't care. I don't want to, I don't want to even spend all this energy thinking about it, because I saw that it caused people to, it seemed like they obsessed over it. Grandma, for example, obsessed over her religion. So for me, I was like, I don't know. I don't know and I don't care. And then, spirituality found me in my darkest hour. And I had my awakening. And my first foray back into it was Course in Miracles. And I took 2 semesters of Course in Miracles courses at an adult enrichment course at a local college. And that was the beginning. And then I started meditating and working with tantric practices, and then I ended up in India. And so, it was like spirituality was just waiting for me to be ready, and it was there for me in a moment when I really needed it. And that's the beauty of it all, right? That's why I think that we connect so deeply with whatever spiritual label or religious label you want to give it. We connect with these things. We connect with having a faith, because in those moments, in the darkness, we can tune into something is there for us. Something is protecting us. Something is guiding us. When we really tune in, we can find that inner voice is leading us out of the darkness, and we can choose to listen, and we can choose to follow it. And there's many different paths, and many different archetypes that might take on. It might take on as the great mother wrapping you up. It might take on as father energy. There's many different ways and symbols and archetypes that you can tune into to, in the yogic practices, you call it an ishta. An ishta appears to you, and it's there to guide you in those moments. And for me, it was hugely awakening for me, and my life would never be the same. But when I was younger, no, there was absolutely not. I did not like going to Unity Church. I went there because you guys went, and I just went with you, and I was your child, and I could not be left at home. So that was that.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention one other thing, and that is what's particularly exciting, I think, in today's climate, is the fact that really science is in itself another great spiritual path, and then it is that the modern physics is more and more teaching and validating what spiritual and religious groups have been saying all along in terms of understanding the nature of reality. So I think that's really exciting too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting.
It's all about math.
Yeah, it's really interesting now to have, the scientific studies are coming out, and guess what, meditation works. We've done all these scans on the brain, and by golly, it works. And it's like, the yogis have known this for tens of thousands of years. And something that my teacher says that I love is that you don't need a person in a white coat to verify and to tell you what is true. Become the scientist and the lab, and experience for yourself. Make yourself the experiment. Make your life the experiment. And then you get to get the results through your own experience, and you don't have to wait for someone to tell you it works or not. And I think that's also maybe a difference in religion and spirituality. With those people that were brought up in a religion where they were told, this is how it is, you have to believe in this is what you have to do. versus those of us that were fortunate to have it all be kind of experiential, experience it for yourself. And that's why I think it's natural for me to teach that to others. Is I'm not here to tell you the experience that you're meant to have. I'm here to take you on a journey to guide you and to invite you and to share what works for me, and then you decide. And how deep you want to go is up to you.
Yeah, well, no, that's a great way to do it. Yeah, absolutely. You just have to go into it and experience it, for sure. And, you know, obviously, other people's experiences and can help you understand. Yeah, but ultimately, yes, we're each an individual journey to the same place, but it could be a lot of different ways. Yeah, so, so I'm glad that you are where you are now. Very exciting, and I'm glad that you are nourished by everything you're nourished by, and I'm glad you're sharing it with people. That's a beautiful thing. So.
Thanks, Dad.
Oh, thank you.
All right. I think that we could probably talk for hours about all of this stuff. And I think that for today, we're going to close our conversation. And I just want to thank you for being my dad and tell you that I love you very, very much. Thank you for giving me the freedom that you've given me in my life to discover on my own who I am. And thank you for sharing so generously today your experiences and your wisdom. I love you.
Love you.